Welcome to the Wicket.
Hello, and here we are again for a new episode of your favourite cricket chat at The Wicket, Arab News' very own cricketing podcast. I'm your host, Brian Murgatroyd, and with me once again to discuss what's happening in the sport locally in the Gulf, regionally in Asia and worldwide, our Arab News columnist Jon Pike and Arab News cricket reporter Suba Humagain. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello, Brian and Subas.
Hi, John. Hi, Brian.
And in this show, we reflect upon a dramatic test between Pakistan and Bangladesh in Rawalpindi. There's a test win for England against Sri Lanka at Lord's to unpack. Jay Shah's confirmation as the new ICC Chair has come, and we discuss what it means for the sport. We wrap up the West Indies-South Africa Men's 2020 International Series, look back on the Women's Caribbean Premier League, and discuss the start of the men's tournament. We speak about the drafts for the Big Bash and the Women's Big Bash leagues in Australia. We look ahead to the England Women's Tour of Ireland, and on top of that, as ever, Subas and John tell us what's caught their attention in the world of cricket in the recent past. So, lots to get our teeth into. Let's get started. The second test between Pakistan and Bangladesh in Rawalpindi proved to be a memorable one, an absolute cracker. After the first day was washed out, Pakistan put into bat, scrambled to 274, only to then reduce Bangladesh to 26 for 6 in reply. But from that position, the touring team fought back with Liton Das scoring a superb 138 and Mehdi Hassan Miraz, who had earlier taken 5 wickets with his off-spin, he made 78 as the pair added 167 for the 7th wicket. It meant that Bangladesh trailed by just 12 on first innings, and then their quick bowlers got to work. They bowled Pakistan out for just 172, and all 10 wickets in the innings were taken by Bangladesh pacers. It left Bangladesh 185 to win to secure the series, and they got there with 6 wickets in hand, a consistent batting performance, and a remarkable success for the touring team. Plenty for us to talk about, but Subas, let's start with that victory for Bangladesh in the series, a 2-0 win. I don't think many of us saw that coming at the start of the series, did we?
No, I don't think that was the case. Bangladesh coming from the unrest, new board in charge, and Pakistan. I think they really wanted to kick on from here. Their home form was not that impressive, but Bangladesh they were disciplined in all the matters. At times it looked like Pakistan would dominate, but they came back really well, and Pakistan, it's only getting worse and worse for them.
John, one key statistic from the series was that Bangladesh added more than 200 runs after they lost their 6th wicket on 2 occasions. Does it mean something is fundamentally wrong with the captaincy of Shan Masood or the bowling or both? And if so, what is it?
Well, at 26 for 6, the coup de grace doesn't need to be applied. Coach Gillespie said the bowlers drifted away from the plans that were laid out ahead of the test. They'd been spoken to about being ruthless, being disciplined and bowling with intent. The 3-man pace attack of Shahzad Mohammed Ali and Mir Hamza is a combined experience of 10 tests. Spinner Abrar Ahmed had only 5 tests. He failed to take a wicket in 32 overs. I think the inexperience showed. Captains also relatively inexperienced. Watching on the sidelines, of course, were Shaheen Afridi and Nazim Shah. And amongst all of this, I think we have to remember that Bangladesh have played terrifically. And as Subas mentioned, the emergence of fast bowling for a country that doesn't normally produce them has been quite remarkable.
Yes, Subas, when you and I were in the Caribbean for the T20 World Cup, it seemed an exciting time for Bangladesh in terms of their quick bowlers. And goodness me, didn't they deliver in that crucial third innings? Taskin Ahmed, the experienced one, but then Hassan Mahmood with 5 for 43 and Nahid Rana with 4 for 44. That's great times for Bangladesh with all of a sudden an emergence of quick bowlers like that, isn't it?
Yeah, it is very fantastic to see, and not just fast bowlers. We had wrist spinner in Risat Hossain as well, who's got the BBL contract. So looks like there's been a long-term plan from Chandika Singh, who's not getting good backing from the board. But we saw a lot of fast bowlers coming up, not just in Test cricket, but limited over cricket as well. It used to be Taskin leading that line. Mustafa Murtaza is one of the prime bowlers, but we didn't see these kind of pace bowlers back in the days. But it looks like there's internal competition that has stepped up the team, and it's fantastic to see that subcontinent bowlers are dominating Sena pitches as well.
And Subhash, talk to us about that innings of Lytton Das, an incredible effort given the rubble of that first innings. Everyone's known for a long time he's a talented player, but he's often flattered to deceive. But to produce an innings like that in that situation, truly remarkable.
Indeed, Brian, and this must be one of the best innings he's played for Bangladesh. And when the team was reeling 26 for 6, you had to be cautious, and he did. Credits to Mehdi for starting put and getting that partnership. But I think that poor start gave Pakistan a chance to close out the game. But Lytton's innings, I think that's changed the fortune for Bangladesh.
And John, there seems to be a pall of negativity around Pakistan cricket. Jason Gillespie, I'm sure, will be weighed down by it after only 2 matches in charge of the Test team. Is it a case of the players' performances producing that negativity, or are the players being dragged down by the negativity and so are underperforming?
It's difficult to know where to start. It can't just be the players. Something wrong collectively and at a much higher level, I think, than the players and the coaches. There seems to be a malaise in the country at large. You know, the team's now played, 10 tests in a row at home without winning, 4 draws and 6 losses. The last victory was February 21 when they beat South Africa in Rawalpindi. And then Babar Azam's lack of form, of course, mirrors this. 16 consecutive innings without a 50 at an average of 14. Which is incredible. Fast bowlers have been less effective, a lower pace, injury, of course. Wicket-taking abilities are down.
Goodness me, there's very little positive coming out of Pakistan at the moment. But from a Bangladesh point of view, Subhash, I just wonder, does this incredible series result make it difficult, if not impossible now, for new Bangladesh Cricket Board President Farooq Ahmed to dismiss Chandika Hathirasinghe, the head coach, something he's made clear he would like to do?
I think there's no point in making this change now. I voiced support to Chandika in previous episodes, and I think this result has just proven that the team is finally sitting down with the coach, and the results are coming. And I don't think it's a short-term perspective. I think Chandika has something long-term for Bangladesh cricket, and there's no point in changing. I think the off-field issues should not impact the development inside the pitch, in my opinion, and the incoming president should take his words back for the betterment of the team.
England sealed their 3-match Test series against Sri Lanka with a match to spare at Lord's, with a 190-run success with a day and almost a session to spare. England recovered from a modest start, losing 3 wickets before lunch after being put into bat, and they recovered thanks to hundreds by Joe Root and Gus Atkinson. And once they'd topped 400, they took control of the match and never relinquished it. Root scored another 100 in England's second innings, his 34th in Test cricket, taking him past Sir Alistair Cook's record tally for his country to help set the touring side a target of 483. And with player of the match Gus Atkinson taking 5 for 62, they never got anywhere near it. John, let's start with Joe Root, whose 200s did so much to cement England's position in the match. It's easy to take him for granted, but going past Cook's record, does this give him a claim to be England's best all-format batter?
Well, let's have a look at his record. 145 tests, 171 ODIs, but only 32 T20s, the last one being in May 2019. So I think you have to take T20 out of the equation. His ODI runs are second only to Owen Morgan, but at a far superior average, and 1,000 more than third-placed Ian Bell. In tests, he now has 12,377 runs, only 95 runs behind Cook in first place, but at a superior average, 51 against 45. So So I think in the modern era, the last 55 years, say, it can be argued convincingly that he's been the best across tests and ODIs. How well does he compare with previous test greats, most of whom played on uncovered wickets, played less tests? Well, I'll give you some names to think about. Wally Hammond, average 58.45, Len Hutton 56.7, Ken Barrington 58.7, and then of course Hobbs and Sutcliffe 57 and 61 respectively. Also, they all scored 100 in Australia. Joe hasn't done that yet, but he does have 200 catches and is third on the all-time list.
He's certainly in the conversation. I think we've established that, but whether he qualifies as England's best ever all-format batter, well, that remains to be seen. Perhaps a win in the Ashes in the winter after this one coming up, and hundreds to boot in Australia, that might give him a better claim. John, how important is Root in an England lineup that plays with a freedom that some would suggest is recklessness?
Well, he's absolutely vital. I mean, he's the glue. He's masterful. He's someone who keeps the scoreboard ticking. His intelligent shot making, his trademark, it's all about precision. And it was all in evidence at Lord's. And he scored 35% of England's runs off the bat. And along with Atkinson, the pair scored 50% of runs. So that gives an indication of just how important he is.
Subas, less than 2 years ago, an unknown Surrey bowler called Gus Atkinson was called in by ILT20 side the Desert Vipers as a net bowler, but he was then elevated to the full squad when Saqib Mahmood pulled out with a recurrence of a back injury. Since then, it's been an incredible rise for Gus, and now he's become one of England's first picks. What do you make of his latest performance?
Well, Gus is one of the find of franchise leagues in the line of Aristrop, I'd say. This is what the leagues around the world should be doing. It's been platform to those other talent, and Gus has taken the opportunity with both hands since that break with Desert Vipers. I think his test debut coincided with Anderson's farewell test, and taking 10 wickets all in that match was significant. It was like Anderson handing over the baton to Gus, and he has just continued to do what James did. He's taken at least 2 wickets in all 10 test innings he's bowled. Whether or not he'll be able to be consistent like James, I think that is the question now.
Yes, a test 100 for him at Lord's. What a remarkable performance that was to go with all the wickets that he's taken. John, it's not all rosy in the garden for England, though. 2 more failures for Ollie Pope as captain, but England did, of course, win easily. I remember one of England's greatest ever captains, Mike Brearley, had a very modest test record. Ollie Pope's is far superior to his. But given he led England, that's Brearley, to so many wins, that modest form was usually, but not always, accepted as long as those wins kept on coming. Should we hold Ollie Pope to a different standard of that? England won, after all.
He's been captain in only 2 tests, both of which were won. There's 1 to go, back end of this week, and Stokes going to return for the away series in Pakistan. No doubt Pope will have learned from the experience. But I have to say that his cause not really helped by Michael Vaughan, opining that Pope is a very insecure person and that he did not like him as a captain. Well, that sort of comment will not help any insecurity, will it? I think that's a truly appalling comment. I think they've got not enough to talk about, which is where these rather extraneous comments seem to creep in from.
Subas, what about Sri Lanka? Were you surprised by the decision to put England into bat, something that ultimately handed the home side the initiative? Or was it simply a defensive move because of their batting frailties, something we've discussed on numerous occasions here on this podcast?
Well, it's the same story all over again. Top order not being able to see off the new ball. Even Dan Lawrence didn't stay for long, but England had Zorut in the middle order, something Sri Lanka can learn from on how to stabilize the innings. I think they needed more than anyone at the moment. In the second innings, Dimo, Dinesh and Captain Dhananjay, I think all had starts, but could not convert it to a big one. And when you're playing away, chasing, I think you must have your experienced players to step up and lead that batting. Sri Lanka have found it hard to stay consistent in the batting itself.
And Subas, a word on Kamindu Mendis, whose first innings of 74 followed on from his 100 in the first test. He again looked terrific, didn't he? Shouldn't he be batting higher in the order, do you think? Or is it a case of him having success at 7, so he should stay there?
Well, his first-class numbers suggest he can bat for long and high as well. His 2 centuries has come in at number 7, other one coming at number 8, and he has 16 centuries in 48 first-class matches. That's 1 in every 3, so him coming up may be good for Lankans, but at whose expense? I think that's the real question.
John, we can't leave the subject of this Lord's Test alone without a word on the crowd, or lack of it, on the final day. There were only 9,000 spectators at Lord's on day 4, a weekend too. Lord's Chief Executive Officer Guy Lavender has promised a review into pricing. But what do you put the no-show down to? Is it high prices? The fact that Sri Lanka and the West Indies have really threatened to create a contest that goes into day 4 this summer? Perhaps the fact school holidays were coming to an end, or the fact that there are 2 back-to-back tests taking place in the same city, London, with the next match at the Oval? Or is it a combination of all those things coming together, a perfect storm, if you like, to produce such a low attendance?
Well, I think it is a combination of all of the above, but I would also add the start of the English Premier League, and I would add that a surfeit of cricket, mainly short form stuff, in the preceding months. So I think there is a perfect storm and a number of different factors. I think buying a day 3 or 4 ticket this summer carries a risk of not getting value for money, and the passage of play after Root's electrifying innings will not have encouraged those with marginal interest in Test cricket. Now, bad light meant that spinners had to bowl. Sri Lanka blocked. All the players gave the impression that they didn't want to be out there. Pope put on a quick bowler, and of course, off they went. 22 overs short of the allotted overs for the day. Pretty farcical, really. As for Lords and the MCC, I seem to remember Lavender saying it didn't matter what they charged, people will still feel Lords. There were signs last year that this inelasticity of pricing was being stretched, and this year it's become visible. India visit next year, so all should be well. Nevertheless, one can see that Test cricket's edges are beginning to crumble.
Well, the final test at the Oval gets underway on Friday, the 6th of September, and we'll chat about it next time here at the Wicket. On the previous podcast, we discussed the suggestion floated by Cricket Australia of a Test cricket fund created by the ICC to help lower-ranked ICC full members play more tests and also pay their players more money to ensure they play that format rather than opt for the riches of the T20 franchise world. But since then, the outgoing Chief Executive Officer of Cricket West Indies, Johnny Grave, has said that he doesn't think the fund, which has been pitched at around 15 million US dollars, will do very much to assist the longest format to flourish in the face of the T20 charge. John, the interview I've heard saw Grave pretty dismissive of the fund, saying that other issues needed addressing as well as that provision of money. What do you think?
Well, not dismissive, but he doubts that it will make much difference on its own, although he did suggest that it does represent a change in the mindset amongst the big 3, India, Australia and England. If they recognise that they need more competitive opponents, and the lack of attendance at Lords is pretty symbolic of that need, then they may well adopt other measures. Graves wants to see 3-match series, competitive warm-up matches and far more A-team tours to acclimatise younger players to what is it like to play abroad in competitive conditions. And neither the West Indies nor Sri Lanka had decent warm-ups in England, leaving them very unprepared. And in general, he hopes to see a much more collegiate approach amongst 4 members to address this issue.
Subas, how damaging do you think were Graves' comments to Cricket Australia's hopes of getting this fund off the ground at ICC level? Or was the point of Cricket Australia's Mike Baird going public with the plan all part of a strategy to get the debate going so that agreement might be easier come the time of the ICC board meeting later this year?
Well, the opinions are floating around, and that will be valuable in the decision-making process. Graves' comment, I think they're best in reality. He faced while looking over West Indies, and they were one of the teams that were badly hit by franchise versus the country thing. At times, they had to debut a player in every next test they play. ICC certainly will take his comments seriously and get a bit. I think they should get better solutions rather than just pouring more funds from here.
Well, when the ICC board meets at the end of the year, it will be with India's Jay Shah taking over as ICC Chair in succession to Greg Barclay. The role of the chair is to be independent, and so it will mean India will have to have a new representative as a board member. With Jay Shah having to relinquish his Indian cricket role, it also means he'll have to step down as chair of the Asian Cricket Council, and Pakistan's Mohsin Naqvi is being tipped in the media to assume that position. So, Subas, plenty of things to consider there, and one of the first major issues on Shah's to-do list in his ICC role is to ensure a successful ICC Champions Trophy in Pakistan. On his watch with the Board of Control for Cricket in India, India hasn't toured Pakistan, and the suspicion is, with Narendra Modi and the BJP in power there, including Shah's father Amit, who's India's Home Affairs Minister in the Modi government, it's unlikely to do so this time either. How does Jay Shah reconcile his domestic position with his ICC position on this issue, do you think?
It remains to be seen, Brian, but what we saw earlier was when Shah was the ICC chair, Asia Cup matches that involved India was shifted to Sri Lanka, and that had a lot of financial burden on ACC, but they took it. But I doubt if ICC will take the same path. It's tough to strip Pakistan of hosting rights overall, and if India is not playing, they'll need to search for multiple venue, and that will have a lot of financial repercussions. I think Shah will have a tough time staying neutral, even though there has been influence of BCCI in ICC's decision-making process for a long time. Him being at helm, I think that will certainly add to that pressure.
And John, do you have faith that Jay Shah can bring about a successful resolution to a row that's flared up with Disney Star wanting to renegotiate the terms of its broadcast rights deal with the ICC for events following what it believed to be an unsuccessful T20 World Cup?
Well, caveat emptor springs to mind, along with Cake and Eat It. Star entered into a $3 billion deal jointly with ZTV for 24-27 cycle. However, Z withdrew from its commitment following the collapse of its planned merger with Sony, leaving Star to shoulder the deal on its own shoulders. And that needs everything to go well to cope with that loss. And Star argues that the T20 World Cup did not go well, as you mentioned, on two grounds. One was washed out matches, especially India v Canada, and low scoring key matches, semi-final, South Africa, Afghanistan, and of course the India v Pakistan match, which adversely impacted forecast revenues. Now, these companies are very happy to take profits, but look to be bailed out if profits are in jeopardy. I mean, there are risks associated with playing cricket in terms of pitch condition and weather, at least outside of the IPL. Broadcast deals generally lack refund clauses, making it uncertain how successful they are going to be in persuading Shah. Now, I don't doubt that a deal will be done, but, who bono?
Yes, it'll be very interesting to see how that particular issue is resolved one way or the other. Subas, with the likely change at the top of the Asian Cricket Council, what does that mean for the leading associates like the UAE, Nepal, Oman, as well as Saudi Arabia and other up-and-coming teams like that? Is it simply business as usual? Nothing will change? What do you think?
Well, there are already so many good things going on in the region. The pathways for ICC events, the ACC events itself, the age group tournaments, women's game have increased in numbers. So even if the new leadership comes, I think they just can continue what's going on, and that will be good. But the new leadership, I think they will try to add something to show their presence, to show some change, and that will be even better.
A question for both of you now. Do you think the ascension of Shah to the ICC's top job means it an absolute certainty now that the ICC World Test Championship final will be moving to India sooner rather than later? John, first of all?
Well, I think it's highly likely it's going to move away from England. Whether it goes to India or whether it's done on a cycle basis according to weather conditions and ground availability is something else to be seen. It will need some nimble footwork to adapt the 2-year cycle. It runs from July to a June final, especially given the plethora of franchise leagues in the first 5 months of the year. And then a look at the current cycle. All series and matches have dates fixed for completion by the end of January 2025, except for a 2-match series between Australia and Sri Lanka and South Africa and Bangladesh. So I think there is the opportunity to be a little bit flexible, even within cricket's very crowded calendar.
Subas, what do you reckon? The World Test Championship final to be in India very soon?
I don't see a reason why not. But as I said in earlier episodes, this would be merit-based. The final can be played on the home soil of champions. I think that would be an advantage for defending champions as well.
The West Indies wrapped up their three-match T20I series against South Africa with a third win in Trinidad and Tobago. Rain reduced that contest to 13 overs a side, and after South Africa scored 108 for 4, the West Indies blasted their way to victory by 8 wickets with 22 balls to spare, an incredible winning margin given the truncated nature of the match. Shai Hope scored 42 not out from 24 balls. Nicholas Pooran hammered 35 from only 13 deliveries, and Shimron Hetmeyer applied the coup de grace with 31 not out in 17 balls. The West Indies hit 9 sixes in 9 overs and 2 balls, and only Tristan Stubbs with 40 from 15 deliveries for South Africa could match that type of scoring rate. Subas, South Africa was without a host of top players, as we mentioned in the previous podcast. So does this result highlight a lack of depth in their short form squad, do you think?
I don't think we can call it lack of depth, but players not turning up to get the chances. I think it's like they're playing the second 11 totally. But these players have been around the senior team setup, and when they get chance, I think they should prove themselves. Rassi, Donovan, Rickelton, Mulder, I think they need to get numbers in this situation to stay put, and they didn't impress at all. On the bowling side, the new look attack was not consistent enough, but I think Bartman showed why he has been around the senior team for a long time now.
John, should West Indies fans be getting excited about this series win, or does it need to be taken with a very large dose of salt, given that South Africa was missing so many big-name players, and also, of course, given it's 2 years until the next T20 World Cup?
Yes, salt is needed, but it has provided a ray of hope in an otherwise disappointing sequence of results for the West Indies.
Of course, this series was simply an aperitif for the Caribbean Premier League, which got underway off the back of it. This is the 12th season of the franchise tournament, which this year sees 6 teams, the Antigua and Barbuda Falcons, who've replaced the Jamaica Talawars, the Barbados Royals, the Guyana Amazon Warriors, the St Kitts and Nevis Patriots, the St Lucia Kings, and the Trinbago Knight Riders, battling for the title currently held by Guyana Amazon Warriors, who overwhelmed Trinbago Knight Riders in last year's final. The tournament started brightly with 2 last ball finishes in the first 2 matches, but 4 of the first 5 games were won by the side batting second, a worrying trend for those wanting uncertainty. John, the first thing that struck me looking at the squads for this edition of the Caribbean Premier League was the South African contingent. Several top players who didn't play in the T20I series against the West Indies, they were instead preparing for and now playing for franchise teams instead. Names like Quinton de Kock, David Miller, Keshav Maharaj, Anrich Nortje. Is this a sign that all bilateral cricket, not just tests, is under threat from T20 franchise cricket?
Very likely. And we know that South Africa has adopted a sort of existentialist stance re the SA20 franchise competition. Revenue is seen as a saviour of cricket in the country, and players are clearly attuned to this policy. I mean, it is my view that there are too many franchise leagues, that their growth has been unregulated, that the existentialist argument has led to their approval being flagged through. Greed is good mantra now flows through quick cricket. Do we think that Mr. Shah will put a block on this? His appointment was unopposed, probably on the basis that he's the man to bring more money into the game.
Subas, what are your expectations for this CPL? Apart from Ali Khan at the Knight Riders and David Visa at the St Lucia Kings, associate representatives are pretty thin on the ground, aren't they?
Well, with the talent in Caribbean, it's always tough for associates to make the cut. And when you have top players from test nations available, it's only getting harder. And on the other side, associate players need to show their performance and not just for the nations. I think chances they get in other franchise league, they need to be consistent and get the numbers to get these big contracts. And so far, I don't think they've fired enough to get these contracts.
Well, the men's tournament followed on from the women's CPL, with the 3rd edition of that finishing with victory for the Barbados Royals. They were the top side in the round-robin stage of the tournament and cemented that fact with a narrow win over Trinbago Knight Riders in the final, with the Guyana Amazon Warriors, the 3rd team, winning just once in 4 matches in the group stage and so failing to make the final. John, you have to give credit to the CPL for establishing a women's event, but with only 3 teams, is there enough jeopardy to make it compelling?
It started in 2022. Each team plays each other twice in the group stage, leading to the final. It isn't many matches, and it does really need to grow. this year I think there are too many other competing events, including, of course, preparation for the Women's T20 World Cup.
And Subas, what was your main takeaway from the women's tournament this year?
Well, it was dominance that Royal showed. I think they just lost one match, and Matthews taking the MVP trophy, I think that was fitting as well. She dominated both bowling and batting charts, and West Indies will be counting on her when the World Cup comes up later this month.
Yes, Hayley Matthews, she's having an absolutely fantastic 2024. Can she continue that at that World Cup that Subas mentioned? Well, rest assured, we'll be across that here at the Wicket. The drafts for the next editions of Australia's Big Bash and Women's Big Bash have taken place since our last episode. The women's event, which will take place off the back of the upcoming T20 World Cup in the UAE, really does have the cream of the women's game all set to line up for the 8 franchises. Included in the squads are some star Indian names, with India's women allowed to play in franchise tournaments, unlike their male counterparts. Deepti Sharma and Yastika Bhatia will line up for the Melbourne Stars. Smriti Mandana is on the books of the Adelaide Strikers. Jemima Rodrigues and Shikha Pandey have been drafted by the Brisbane Heat. And D. Hemalata is in line to play for the Perth Scorchers. Among other big overseas stars taking part are a host of international captains, with the West Indies' Hayley Matthews set for the Melbourne Renegades, England's Heather Knight and Chamari Atapattu of Sri Lanka lining up at Sydney Thunder. Laura Volvehart of South Africa will play for the Adelaide Strikers, while New Zealand's Sophie Devine was pre-signed for the Perth Scorchers. With the men, England seemed to be the go-to country for the franchises, with 14 players from that country drafted. Current Test players Ben Duckett with the Melbourne Stars, stand-in Test captain Ollie Pope at the Adelaide Strikers. They're included in that number 14. And also signed was Rishad Hossain, the Bangladesh leg spinner who made an outstanding impression for his country in the T20 World Cup in the Caribbean. Subas, let's talk about the signings for the women's tournament first of all. The 100 in the UK likes to believe it's an outstanding women's event, but surely the quality that will be on show in Australia, together with all the Australian internationals, means this is the premier women's event on the franchise circuit, isn't it?
Yes, Brian, for me, the Women's BBL is still front runner when it comes to the women's tournaments. Cricket Australia has put BBL and WBBL in the same bracket, and that's why women's game has elevated this way, and we can see it in Australia's international research as well. The domestic talent there is already good, and they have premier names from around the world to back it up. The crowd in attendance is getting better every season, and I think it's a big plus for the players as well as Cricket Australia.
Also, John, the sight of Ben Duckett and Ollie Pope among the players drafted in the men's competition, that I'm sure will surprise a few England cricket supporters. Wasn't the idea of multi-year contracts for England players meant to put a stop to them playing franchise cricket in their downtime? And do you actually expect these two to play when the BBL actually opens its doors and the matches get underway in December?
The ECB was keen to counter the threat to player availability posed by T20 franchise tournaments and offer players increased security. It seemed at the time like a panic measure. The timing was awful in the middle of the ODI World Cup, and it has led to anomalies. Some players no longer in the team but being paid. Dawid Malan, for example, has just retired. So, it was never a watertight arrangement. And as far as Ben Duckett is concerned, Peter Moores, the Notts coach, is also coach of Melbourne Stars. So there's some logic in picking him up. He needed a top order left-hander, a known quantity. And he's available for, 6 to 9 matches, excluding the finals. So, yes, I think I would expect to see him play.
Subas, the tournaments have been pared down, with the women's event now at 43 matches compared to 59 last year. The men's is at 44 matches, the same as last season, but greatly reduced from the 61 games of 2022-23. Is it now the right length, do you think?
I think with the players returning from the World Cup to play WBBL, you not want players to have such a long tournament, and having a long tournament doesn't necessarily mean a successful one. I think the balance right now is right: 40 matches in regular season, then the 3 in playoffs, and considering the players are involved in other franchises league as well, I think the balance is right.
And John, there's been quite a bit of cricket happening over the past couple of months in the Northern Territory of Australia, as winter there is the only time to sensibly play play cricket with the very high summer temperatures. Pakistan and Bangladesh's men's A teams have been playing in a 2020 tournament against Australian Big Bash sides. Do you think we could see a Northern Territory franchise in the Big Bash or the Women's Big Bash sooner rather than later?
Probably not sooner. Now, the main reason is high summer temperatures, as you mentioned. Some people think that that's beginning to change. Plus, does the territory have enough local talent or support base? The same argument, has applied to Tasmania. It's also right to mention that, ACT is making a case based on Canberra, the capital. Population's there 460,000 and growing. Northern Territory's 250,000, which is half of Tasmania. Now, is this all big enough to satisfy Cricket Australia officials? And what about funding? Need 4 out of 6 states to vote in favour of membership. And historically, states have been very protective of their position.
Well, the women's tournament is due to start on October the 27th this season, with Adelaide Strikers looking to become the first side to win 3 titles in a row, while the men's event will get underway on December the 15th. Brisbane Heat are the men's champions. Ireland and England's women are all set to play each other in 3 one-day internationals and 3 2020 internationals this month, with the one-day internationals happening first in Belfast as part of the ICC's Women's Championship, while the T20Is will follow in Dublin. Subas, with the ODIs part of the qualification process for next year's Women's World Cup in India, ordinarily you would say they were significant, but England are locked in already as one of the top sides in the championship table, and Ireland are at the foot of that table and are already resigned to playing in the qualifier. So what significance do these matches actually have, do you think?
Oh, well, I think this series may not have significance in the table, but will hold importance to Ireland, who have been impressive recently. This will help them to test their core ahead of the qualifiers, where they will have comparatively weaker opponents. And for England, I think they will have an eye on T20I Series already, with the World Cup looming close.
Well, John, given that T20 World Cup is so close, would you have expected England to have named a side close to that World Cup squad that appears in the UAE? As it is, only all-rounder Freya Kemp and wicketkeeper Bess Heath of the World Cup squad have been named in the T20I Series in Ireland.
It's a little surprising, but I guess they are trying out the range of emerging talent, which is now coming through in an international setting, not too far from home, and all watched over by Captain Kate Cross. Whilst an honour for her, is this a prelude to a step into management and coaching for her?
Yes, it's an interesting question that I guess will be answered in the near future in some way, shape or form. Of course, England have put a lot of store by the fact they're having a pre-World Cup training camp in Abu Dhabi. So as a result of that, many of the players given some downtime now towards the end of the domestic season. Subas, a word on Orla Prendergast, the Ireland all-rounder who's been drafted by the Adelaide Strikers in the Women's Big Bash League. She was instrumental in the one-day international series win against Sri Lanka last month, scoring an unbeaten 122 and taking 3 for 25 in the decisive second match. What do you make of that news regarding that drafting?
I think that's her reward for fantastic 2024 she has had in the sort of format. She scored consistently this year and can bowl when needed to. At just 22, I think she has a lot to offer. And Adelaide, I think they have had Smriti and Laura on the roster, 2 of the best players in the world. So it's best to take the risk on Orla. And if she comes good, I think they'll have 3 fantastic players from overseas.
And John, the England squad for the 2020 International Series in Ireland includes Mahika Gore, the teenage left-arm fast bowler who played for the UAE before switching to the country of her birth. She's had a season ruined by injury and also A-level studies. Do you see it as a disappointment she didn't make the World Cup squad, or a positive that she's on her way back and has a huge amount of potential?
I take it as the latter. And remember, there is some pretty stiff competition in the England ranks.
Well, Ireland will be without captain Laura Delaney, who injured ankle ligaments during the one-day international series against Sri Lanka, with Gabby Lewis, who herself was injured in that series, back to deputise. Lewis, remember, scored 119 from 75 balls in Ireland's win over Sri Lanka in the 2020 international series that preceded the ODIs. England, meanwhile, as John has already mentioned, captained by Kate Cross in Ireland, Cross missing out on World Cup selection. The first one-day international is on Saturday, the 7th of September, and we'll cover off that match next time here at the Wicket. And finally, gentlemen, as we always do, let's hear from you about something that's caught your attention this week in the world of cricket. Subas, first of all.
Well, Joe Root coming back to form is a really good thing to see. We had Fab Four of our generations. We thought they're coming to an end. Virat Kohli made an impressive comeback, and now it's Joe Root making his comeback. That twin turn is really special, and him chasing Sachin Tendulkar for that highest test runs. I think it's brilliant to see him coming back.
And John, what do you reckon?
Well, apart from 16-year-old Farhan Ahmed's breaking of W.G. Grace's 150-year record as the youngest player to take 10 wickets in a first-class match, that was for Notts against Surrey, I return to real grassroots cricket. At the bottom of Division 9 South of the Derbyshire Cricket League 2 weeks ago, one of the openers faced 137 deliveries for naught not out in a total score of 21 for 4 in 45 overs, which included 9 extras. This was in response to the opposition's 271 for 4 in 35 overs. Quite the opposite of bish-bash T20 professional cricket.
Gosh, that must have been absolutely thrilling to watch. Such a shame that I missed out on that one. As you say, John, something for the purists rather than perhaps the modern cricket fans to enjoy. Well, that's all from this episode of The Wicket. We'll be back soon with more cricket chat from the Gulf region, Asia and worldwide. As ever, please don't forget to like, subscribe and comment on what you've heard wherever you get your podcast. But for now, this is Brian Murgatroyd along with Jon Pike and Suba Humagain saying thanks for listening, and until next time, goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.